She thought she could cheat and walk away clean. What she didn't know was that the prenup she made me sign would be the thing that ruined her life. My wife, Amanda, and I had been together nearly 12 years, married for 8 of those. We'd built a life together, nothing flashy but solid, predictable, comfortable. She had a demanding job as a project manager at some marketing agency, often staying late at the office. Meanwhile, I managed a small network of gyms around town, so my hours were more relaxed and flexible. Looking back now, I think that routine, our predictable rhythms, made it easier for me to overlook the small, creeping changes. Just last weekend, Amanda suggested we go on a picnic. We hadn't done something like that in years. She packed up a cooler with sandwiches, chips, her favorite rose, and lemonade for me. The whole thing was her idea. Lately, she'd been kind of withdrawn, more distant than usual, but I figured work must have been getting to her. She's always been intense about her career, fiercely independent, never letting anyone push her around. Honestly, that strength was one of the first things that drew me to her. She didn't back down from anything or anyone. We ended up at this quiet little corner of the park by the lake, our usual spot. It's tucked away, peaceful. The trees were swaying in the breeze, and the lake water lapped gently against the shore. I cracked a joke, I don't even remember what it was, and she laughed, really laughed. In that moment it felt like everything was okay again. Like we'd somehow found our way back to how things used to be. But then just for a moment her expression shifted. There was this far-off look in her eyes, like she wasn't really there with me. It was quick, barely noticeable. Then she smiled again, took a sip of wine, and whatever I thought I saw vanished just as quickly. I dismissed it. Told myself I was imagining things. But now I can't stop thinking about that look. After that day something began to nag at me. It wasn't anything obvious at first, just subtle shifts. Things only someone who spent years beside their partner would catch. Amanda had always been open about her work, venting about coworkers, complaining about clients who changed their minds every 5 minutes. She never held back. But lately she'd become quiet, guarded almost. When I'd ask how her day went, she'd just say, "Same old," and then try to change the topic to something about my day instead. It was so slight that I might have missed it if we hadn't been together for so long. I kept brushing it off, chalking it up to her new promotion. With more responsibility came longer hours and more stress, right? That's what I told myself. Then came the shift with her phone. Amanda's always been pretty attached to her phone, nothing unusual there, but something changed. She started placing it face down during dinner, which she never used to do. And she'd take it everywhere, even when stepping into the other room for just a moment. The bathroom, the kitchen, her phone was always with her. She'd never been secretive before, not like this. But now, it felt deliberate. One night, I tried to ask her about it, tried to keep it light. I joked, "What's with the phone lately? You hiding some big secret?" I meant it playfully, hoping she'd just laugh it off. But she paused. It wasn't long, just a split second, but I saw it. Then she chuckled and said, "What, are you spying on me now?" She brushed it off, but there was a strange edge in her voice. Like I'd poked at something she didn't want touched. That's when I started noticing more. Those little cracks that hadn't been there before. I couldn't help myself. I started watching more closely. Then came that Friday night. She told me she was meeting some coworkers for drinks, something she'd done now and then. But this time felt different. She'd been going out more lately, always using the same excuse. Just some drinks with the girls. I remember sitting on the couch, watching her as she got ready. She pulled out that black dress, the one she usually saved for anniversaries or formal dinners. It hugged her figure perfectly. And for a second I just looked at her, remembering the way I used to when we were first dating. She had this natural beauty that didn't need effort, but that night, it was clear she'd gone the extra mile. The makeup, the hair, the heels, it was more than just a casual night with friends. I made a comment, something like, "Wow, going all out for a girls' night, huh?" She gave me a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "We might hit somewhere nicer this time. I just wanted to feel good tonight." I nodded, trying to believe her. I wanted to believe her. She was my wife. Why wouldn't I trust her? But as the door closed behind her, something deep in my gut twisted. That kind of feeling you can't quite explain, like the ground beneath you is shifting and you don't know why yet. I stayed up that night. Told myself I wasn't waiting for her, that I was just killing time flipping through TV channels. Midnight rolled by. Still no sign of her. 1 o'clock came and she still wasn't home. I sent Amanda a text, kept it casual, nothing dramatic. Just, "Hey, everything good?" Almost a full hour went by before she finally replied, "Yeah, sorry. Lost track of time. Be home soon." When she eventually walked through the door, something felt off. She had that faint scent of perfume on her, but not the usual kind she wore. This was different. And underneath it, there was a subtle trace of cologne. It clung to the air as she leaned in for a quick kiss on my cheek, barely meeting my eyes. "Late one?" I asked, doing my best to sound neutral. She let out a small yawn, eyes drifting away from mine. "You could say that." Then she headed straight to the bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the hallway, with a cold unease tightening around my chest. From that night on, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unraveling. It wasn't just the late returns or how much time she spent in front of the mirror before heading out. It was everything. Little inconsistencies like puzzle pieces that didn't quite belong anymore. I started noticing more. Amanda was on her phone constantly, but whenever I entered the room, she'd tuck it away like it was second nature. She said work was draining her, always exhausted. But when it came time to head out for another night of drinks, suddenly she was full of energy. Even on weekends, when we used to enjoy lazy mornings tangled in sheets and sunlight, she'd be up and gone, saying she had errands to run. I could feel her slipping away, and I had no idea how to stop it. One Saturday morning, while we sat at the kitchen table under the soft morning light, I decided to say something. She was barely present, scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. "Hey," I said carefully, "you've been swamped lately. Everything all right?" She looked up like she hadn't expected me to notice. For the briefest moment, something flickered in her eyes, guilt, maybe, but it disappeared behind a soft smile. "Yeah, just been a crazy time at work. You know how it is." "I get it," I said, leaning back trying to sound casual. "It just feels like we haven't spent much time together lately." Her smile wavered for a second, but she nodded. "I know. Just a phase. Things will slow down soon." But they didn't. If anything, they only got worse. A week later, she mentioned a networking event, Tuesday night, work-related. But this time, she didn't even bring up the idea of me going with her. Usually, I'd tag along to these things, play the supportive husband. But that night, she seemed almost relieved I wasn't coming. Something didn't sit right. I opened our shared location app, not because I didn't trust her, at least that's what I told myself, but because I needed to ease the growing tension in my chest. When I checked, her location was turned off. That had never happened before. I tried brushing it off as a glitch. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I stayed up again that night, pretending to watch TV, pretending not to be waiting. When she came in, she barely spoke. No hug, no warmth, just a tired mutter as she made her way straight to bed. That night, it really hit me. Something between us had changed and I couldn't keep pretending otherwise. Still, part of me thought maybe I was imagining things. That maybe I was being too sensitive, reading into things that weren't there. Then Thursday happened. I got a text in the middle of the afternoon. It was from Eric, an old buddy of mine from college. We didn't see each other much these days, but we always kept in touch. He wasn't the type to beat around the bush. The message just said, "Hey, can we talk? It's about Amanda." My stomach tightened. Something about the way he phrased it. It felt heavy. I called him right away. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm even though my pulse was starting to race. Eric hesitated. "Man, I wasn't sure if I should bring this up, but I figured it'd be worse if you heard it from someone else. I've been hearing things. People talk. And I didn't want to stay quiet." My heart thudded in my chest. "Hearing what exactly?" There was a pause. A longer one this time. "Amanda's been seen around town, with someone. A guy. It's happened more than once. Someone saw them last week at that bar on Jefferson. It didn't look like a business thing. More like, personal." I felt everything inside me freeze. "Do you know who he is?" "No idea," he said. "Just that it didn't look like work." "I'm sorry, man. I didn't want to be the one to say it, but I thought you deserved to know." I mumbled something like, "Thanks," but honestly, I don't even remember what I said. I just hung up and stared at the wall. My mind was spinning. Could this really be happening? Was I just connecting dots that weren't there? Or had I been ignoring the obvious? Suddenly, all the little pieces began snapping into place. The late work nights, her changing moods, how she'd always keep her phone out of reach. And now that call from Eric. But even with all that, I still didn't want to believe it. I couldn't bring myself to. This was Amanda, my wife. The person I shared my life with. Could she really be hiding something that serious from me? That evening, I watched the clock like it was daring me to prove myself wrong. I needed to see her, talk to her face to face, try to make sense of it all. But when she walked through the front door, she acted like everything was completely normal. Too normal. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, gave me a soft smile, and asked about my day like we hadn't been drifting apart for weeks. And honestly, that's what frightened me the most. Eric's words kept looping in my head. People have seen her, with some guy. I couldn't shake it. I kept trying to convince myself it was a misunderstanding, that it wasn't what it sounded like. But something inside me knew better. That weekend, I started doing something I never imagined I'd do. I watched her. Closely. It wasn't just the late nights anymore. It was how she'd smile at a message on her phone and then quickly tuck it away. How she'd brush off my curiosity with it just work stuff, but never offer more than that. There was always a gap in the story, something not quite lining up. I'm not proud of what came next. One night, while she was in the shower, I grabbed her phone. My heart was racing so hard I could hear it in my ears. I scrolled through her texts, expecting the worst, but everything looked fine. Just the usual banter between colleagues, a few messages with friends. Nothing jumped out. But I knew that wasn't the whole picture. Her social media had gone eerily quiet too. Amanda used to be one of those people who posted every other day, photos, quotes, little updates. Then suddenly nothing. 4 days. Weeks. It felt like she was trying to vanish in plain sight. So I dug deeper. Checked her email, peeked at her Instagram. Even looked through her Pinterest boards like some desperate detective. And still, nothing obvious. Still, I couldn't shake the tension gnawing at my chest. Then one small thing changed everything. She told me she had a meeting with a client the next day, someone she'd apparently been working with for a few weeks now. At first, it didn't sound unusual. But then I remembered, she'd mentioned this same client every Thursday. 3 weeks in a row. So I tested her. The next morning, while we were having breakfast, I said casually, "Meeting that client again today?" She hesitated. Just long enough for me to catch it. "Yeah," she said almost too quickly. "Why?" "No reason," I replied, trying to sound uninterested. But inside, alarm bells were going off. That hesitation, it told me more than words ever could. When she left for work, I waited about an hour. Then I grabbed my keys and followed her. I kept a safe distance the entire drive, watching her car lead me across town. Eventually, she pulled into the parking lot of this little cafe, not one of her usual haunts. I parked across the street and watched. She stepped inside, glancing around like she was waiting for someone. And sure enough, about 10 minutes later, a man walked in. Tall, well-dressed, confident. He made his way to her table, and the way she smiled at him, it wasn't business. It wasn't even neutral. It was the kind of smile I hadn't seen her give me in years. I stayed in my car, heart in my throat, watching them talk. I couldn't hear a thing, but I didn't need to. The way she leaned in, the way he reached across the table to touch her hand, it told me everything. I felt sick. Like my body had finally caught up to what my heart already knew. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. I needed more than my gut and a glimpse from across a street. If I was going to confront Amanda, I needed something solid, something she couldn't explain away. So I waited. That night, she came home just like always. Same routine. Kiss on the cheek. Light conversation. Smiles like nothing was wrong. And I played along, pretending everything was still fine. But I was just waiting for the next move. A few days later, she said she had another late meeting. The same vague explanation. This time, though, I didn't follow her. I wanted something undeniable. Something I could put in front of her without a single word and watch her face fall. So I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I went through her laptop. She was usually careful with her laptop, always kept it close, like it was an extension of herself. But that night, for some reason, she left it sitting out on the kitchen counter. I stared at it for what felt like forever. I knew the risk. If Amanda caught me digging through her stuff, there'd be no hiding what I was doing. No excuse that would make sense. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know. My hands were shaking as I opened the lid. Her password was the same one she'd always used, predictable, easy. And just like that, her digital life was laid bare in front of me. Emails, messages, everything. At first, I scrolled through the usual work threads, calendar invites, emails with her team. But then I saw a name that stopped me cold. Derek. The same guy I'd seen her with at the cafe. Their email exchange wasn't long, just a handful of messages back and forth. But the tone, it told me everything. It wasn't business. It was full of little private jokes, subtle flirtations. Words you don't send to someone unless there's something more than work between you. My stomach turned as I kept reading, each message pulling me further down. It wasn't just the emails themselves, it was the way they talked to each other. Familiar. Comfortable. Like this had been going on for a while. And then I found the one message that shattered everything. Can't wait for this weekend. I'll book the hotel. Same place as last time? I froze. I read it 3 times hoping I'd misunderstood. But there it was. Hotel. Last time. This wasn't just a flirtation. This wasn't a friendship that had crossed a line once. This was a full-blown affair. Ongoing. Hidden. Repeated. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands went numb, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to break free. The woman I'd built a life with, the woman I trusted above anyone, had been living a lie. And I'd been the fool watching it happen, day after day. I closed the laptop gently, not even sure why I was being careful anymore. Maybe part of me still didn't want to face it, still hoped there was another explanation. But there wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I lay there beside her, staring at the ceiling, her breathing steady like nothing had changed. Like she hadn't torn everything we had apart behind my back. By morning, the shock had hardened into something else, cold, focused anger. I needed more. I had to see it with my own eyes. I needed to be there so when I finally confronted her, there would be no escape. No denial. That Saturday, she told me she had another work event. Her voice was calm, casual. Practiced. But I saw through it now. The moment she left, I followed. I stayed a few cars back, heart thudding in my chest the whole drive. I didn't even know what I was going to do when I got there. I just knew I had to see it for myself. About 20 minutes later, she pulled into a hotel parking lot on the outskirts of town. It wasn't some romantic getaway spot. Just a plain, business-style hotel. The kind people don't go to for the ambience. I parked out of sight and waited, watching as she stepped out of her car and walked inside. Alone. I gave it a few minutes, let her get comfortable. Then I got out and walked toward the entrance trying to steady my breathing. The lobby was quiet. The receptionist barely looked up as I passed. I made my way to the elevator, hands trembling as I pressed the button for the second floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a dim hallway that felt endless. I didn't know which room was hers, but I didn't have to wonder long. Halfway down I heard it. Laughter. Soft, muffled but clear enough to cut right through me. It came from one of the rooms on the left. Her voice. And his. Talking easily, casually, like they didn't have a care in the world. Then the sound of the bed creaking. That was it. I didn't even think. I walked straight to the door and started pounding. Fist to wood over and over, each hit louder than the last. Inside everything went still. Then footsteps. The door opened slowly, just a crack at first. Amanda's face appeared in the gap. Her expression blank, then shocked, like the color had drained from her skin. Her hair was a mess, her lipstick smudged. She opened her mouth like she was about to say something, but nothing came out. I pushed the door open wider and there he was, Derek, sitting at the edge of the bed, shirt halfway undone, frozen like a deer in headlights. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. But in that moment, everything was said. Without a single word. The second I stepped into that room, everything I'd ever trusted, everything I thought I knew, came crashing down around me. The air felt thick like it was squeezing the breath out of my lungs. I couldn't even tell if I was standing or falling. You, I started, my voice cracking with disbelief. This is what you've been doing? Lying? Sneaking around behind my back. Amanda didn't say a word. She just stood there, frozen in place, her eyes wide and terrified, like she'd been caught in a nightmare. Derek jumped to his feet, hands up like I was about to throw a punch. Look, man, he started, but I didn't let him finish. Don't, I said sharply, my voice trembling with fury. Just, don't. I turned back to Amanda. The woman I had loved for over a decade. The one I built my life around. How long? I asked, barely above a whisper. She hesitated, then finally spoke. I didn't plan this, she said, her voice shaky, tears brimming in her eyes. It just happened. I let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow and jagged. It just happened? That's your excuse. She reached out toward me, maybe to explain, maybe out of guilt, but I stepped back. I couldn't bear her touch. Not now. Please just let me explain, she pleaded. No, I said firmly, my voice slicing through the room. I've seen enough. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I didn't feel anything. Not empathy. Not sorrow. Not anymore. I turned and walked away. Left them both standing there, stunned and ashamed. Left that room filled with betrayal and silence. The cold night air hit me like a wall when I stepped outside, but for the first time in weeks, my head felt clear. This wasn't just about what they did. This was about what I was going to do next. Because now I knew the truth. And there was no going back. The drive home was a blur. I don't remember the roads or the stoplights or even turning into the driveway. I just remember the silence, the kind that fills your ears and settles deep in your chest. Amanda had cheated. I'd seen it with my own eyes. There was no what if anymore. And now, I had to figure out what came next. The second I walked through the door, it hit me. The prenup. We'd signed it years ago before we ever said I do. Her lawyer had pushed for it and I didn't argue. Back then, it was just a precaution, something you do when you're trying to be smart about the future. I never once believed we'd actually need it. But now, that piece of paper was the only thing between me and the wreckage Amanda had created. The terms were clear. If either of us cheated, everything, our shared assets, the house, the investments, would go to the one who stayed faithful. Amanda had been so sure, so confident. It's just a formality, she'd said. We'll never need it. But we needed it now. I sat down at the kitchen table, hands still shaking, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the document, the same file I'd tucked away all those years ago. I scrolled until I found the clause. It was all right there. Plain as day. She broke the agreement. She broke us. That night I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark, the prenup on one side of me, memories of our life on the other. It was like watching a house burn down, and realizing you were the only one trying to put out the flames while the other person was pouring gasoline. By morning, my shock had hardened into resolve. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. Ken, I said, steady as I could manage. It's time. I want to start the divorce process. He didn't press for details. He didn't need to. Do you have the prenup? He asked. I do, I replied, staring down at the clause that sealed her fate. She cheated. It's all in there. There was a brief silence. Then a sigh. All right, Ken said. We'll take care of it. You're going to be okay. We spent the next hour sorting through the details. Property. Finances. Everything that was ours, now mine. Amanda had no idea what was coming. That was the part that stung the most. She didn't just betray me, she walked into this thinking there wouldn't be consequences. That evening she walked through the door, calm and casual, like the hotel never happened. Like we hadn't just crossed a line we could never uncross. I didn't say anything. Not yet. I was going to let the papers do the talking. No more begging. No more crying. No more lies. Just the truth. And the consequences that came with it. Hey, Amanda said softly one evening, her voice tentative, like she was dipping her toe into uncertain waters. Can we talk? I didn't even look at her. We will, I said quietly. Soon. She seemed thrown by how cold I sounded, but she didn't push. Maybe she still thought there was room to explain it all away, to convince me I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But that window had long since closed. Just a few days later, the divorce papers were ready. My lawyer had everything drawn up, clear and airtight. That evening, I sat her down at the kitchen table, the same table where we once dreamed of vacations, of children, of growing old together. Now it felt like a courtroom bench. I know about you and Derek, I said flatly, no emotion, just the truth laid bare. She went pale. She didn't try to deny it. Didn't even open her mouth. I've already spoken with my attorney. Everything's in motion. Her eyes filled with tears almost instantly, but I didn't flinch. You knew exactly what this would cost you, Amanda, I said. She looked up, voice small and trembling. I never meant for it to get this far. Please, let's talk. We can still fix this. No, I said, cutting her off as I slid the stack of papers across the table. There's nothing left to fix. And because of what you did, you're walking away with nothing. She blinked, confused, her fingers trembling as she picked up the documents. What do you mean, nothing? The prenup, I said, tapping the section with my finger. Remember? You cheat, you forfeit everything. That was your idea, Amanda. Not mine. Her hands fumbled through the pages, and I could see the color drain from her face as the reality set in. You can't. I didn't think. No, you didn't, I said, my voice steady. You didn't think about me. About us. You made your choice and this is what it looks like. She began to sob, but I didn't reach for her. I stood up, walked away, and left her sitting there in silence, face buried in her hands, surrounded by the consequences of her own decisions. For the next few days, Amanda barely spoke. She moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and distant. I thought maybe that was it, that she'd finally realized what she'd done and would accept it. But I was wrong. 1 week later, she came home different. That soft regret was gone. In its place was the fire I'd seen years ago, the fire that refused to lose, that refused to let anyone else write the ending. We need to talk, she said sharply, standing in the doorway like she was challenging me. I didn't even glance up from my laptop. There's nothing left to say. She marched over and slapped a folder onto the table in front of me. It's not over. Not unless I say it is. I stared at the folder. What's this? Response from my lawyer, she said coolly, folding her arms. You didn't really think I'd let you take everything, did you? Over one mistake. One mistake. My voice cracked as I stood up. This wasn't a slip-up, Amanda. This was months of lies, of sneaking around. Don't downplay what you did. She squared her shoulders. I'm not letting you ruin my life. I helped build this. I gave years to it. I'm not walking away with nothing. I flipped open the folder and scanned the pages. Her lawyer was trying to tear apart the prenup, calling it unreasonable, outdated. Trying to argue she deserved half of everything. You're seriously fighting this? I asked, my jaw tightening. You violated every part of that agreement. That prenup was signed a long time ago, she shot back. A lot has changed since then. I didn't know what I know now. You think that matters? I said. You think you can betray me and then say you've grown, and expect it all to be erased? She leaned in, furious now. I made a mistake, but I'm not letting you destroy everything I worked for just to punish me. I laughed, but it wasn't joyful. It was hollow. You destroyed it yourself. You threw away everything we built for some guy in a suit. And now you want to pretend like you still deserve a share. Her eyes burned with defiance. You think this is just about money? This is about respect. About fairness. I'm not going down without a fight. I stared at her, stunned, not by the threat but by how little remorse was left. Whatever guilt she'd once felt had hardened into resolve. She wasn't looking at me as her husband anymore. She was staring down someone she saw as an opponent. This isn't about fairness, I said quietly. This is about consequences. And you're the one who crossed the line. I stared at her, completely floored by the nerve it took to stand there and argue like she was the one being wronged. This wasn't the Amanda I fell in love with. This wasn't the woman I built a life with. Maybe she had changed somewhere along the way, or maybe I had just never really seen her for who she was. You did this to yourself, I said, my voice low and steady. You made the decision to betray me. And now you're facing the fallout. I'm not backing down. Her jaw tightened, fists clenching at her sides. We'll see, she hissed. Then she turned and stormed off, leaving me alone at the table with her lawyer's counterclaims spread out in front of me. I sat there in silence, heart pounding, not from fear but from disbelief. She was really going to fight. She was going to drag this out, clawing and screaming, even though she was the one who had torched everything. The weeks that followed felt like a battle being waged in slow motion. Amanda's legal team tried everything, calling the prenup outdated, calling it unfair, painting her as a woman wronged. But they hadn't counted on how tightly it had been written. My lawyer had drafted it with precision. There was no ambiguity. And unlike Amanda, I'd held up my end of the deal. She, on the other hand, had blown it wide open. I had evidence, emails, hotel bookings, pictures of her and Derek out in public like nothing mattered. When we finally stood before a judge, all of it was laid bare. The truth had no room to hide. And Amanda, sitting across from me in that courtroom, wore the look of someone who had finally realized the storm she'd brought upon herself. The judge didn't take long. The ruling was clear. The prenup would be enforced. Amanda walked away with nothing. As we left the courtroom, she didn't look at me. There were no parting words, no final scene. Just silence. Her silence said more than any apology ever could. That night I sat in the house alone. My house now. The same house that once echoed with laughter and late-night conversations now sat in stillness. And for the first time that silence didn't feel haunting. Felt clean. Like a space waiting to be lived in again. The day after the ruling, Amanda was gone. She packed her things and slipped out quietly. No drama, no last-ditch effort. Just the sound of drawers opening and closing and then nothing. Word spread fast in our town. People always talk, and this was the kind of scandal that stuck to you. Amanda's name stopped being spoken with admiration. Her reputation, built on confidence, success, control, had cracked. She'd become a cautionary tale. At work, things unraveled. Clients backed off. The confidence she once carried like armor faded. I heard through the grapevine that Derek didn't stick around long. Once the dust settled, once the secret became public and the thrill vanished, he was gone. No goodbye. No explanation. Just another mistake in a line of many. Amanda was left alone to sit in the wreckage of the life she tried to protect, and lost. Meanwhile, I began to breathe again. I sold the house a few months after everything was finalized. I didn't need the space anymore, and truthfully, it carried memories I was ready to leave behind. I moved closer to my gym, to the people and places that reminded me who I was before all of this. And no, I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. It surprised even me how quickly the anger faded. Maybe it was watching her fall apart while I found my footing again. Maybe it was the clarity that came with knowing I had done everything I could, that I had loved fully, stayed faithful, and walked away with my dignity intact. People often ask if I'm doing okay, as if I should be some shattered shell of myself after everything. But the truth is I'm more than okay. I didn't just survive. I came through the fire stronger, clearer, and with a deeper understanding of myself. I held on to my peace, my pride, and yes, even the things we built together, because I earned them. But most importantly, I held on to me. The betrayal, as deep as it cut, no longer owns a piece of me. Amanda's life went a different way. She moved to a small apartment in the city, trying to piece things together again. But with her name still tangled in whispers and her career faltering, it's been an uphill climb. She lost far more than just our marriage. She lost the respect of everyone who once stood behind her. And me? I started over. I traveled, picked up old hobbies, reconnected with friends, even started seeing someone new. Slowly, life began to feel like mine again. Not the life I shared with her, but one I built from the ground up just for me. And when I look back, at Amanda, at Derek, at that hotel room, the courtroom, the nights I couldn't sleep, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel relief. Because I walked away. And she's still running from what she did.